All right, we are recording. Lawrence
Mhm.
Krauss, thank you so much for taking the time to connect today.
It's great to be with you.
So, Lawrence Krauss, for those who don't know, is a world renowned theoretical physicist, commentator, best selling author, and president of the Origins Project Foundation and the host of the Origins podcast. Among Lawrence's numerous important scientific contributions was his proposal in 1995, which showed that most of the energy in the universe resided in empty space. Lawrence, did I get that all correct?
Sounds pretty good to me.
All right.
Sounds,
First
sounds
question.
okay now. Well, probably more than enough.
Yeah. First question. What aspect of the cosmos keeps you up at night?
Well, let's see. I don't know if it keeps me up at night. More the things that keep me up at night tend to be more local than the cosmos. The cosmos has problems, but none that I'm going to solve in particular.
What
And
what what
the
local
misery
stuff
of the
keeps you up at
future
night?
is far off. But I guess the biggest thing that keeps me up at night, I suppose. Well, there's two things. One is the fact that the dominant energy in the universe resides in empty space, which you referred to, which you pointed out in 1995 and was discovered to be true in 1998, and causing a Nobel Prize to be given in 2011 for that. And uh, and we don't have the slightest idea what it is or what its future is or why it's there. And since it's determining the future of the universe, it would be nice to have some idea of why it's there. And secondly, the question of, is our universe unique? Are there many universes? And our perception of our understanding of our own laws of physics here is crucially dependent upon whether there's just one possible universe or many different possible universes, whether the laws of physics in our universe are an accident or not.
And why does that keep you up at night?
Because it would be not because I worry about, because it's of interest to me. It's the deepest question I can think about nature, and since I devoted a large part of my life to thinking about nature, it kind of keeps me up at night.
Maybe there's multiple universes. Maybe there's
Yeah, but
multiple
if there
Lawrence
are multiple
Krauses.
universes, it changes the rules. In other words, as I've pointed out and others have, if there are multiple universes, it's quite possible that the laws of physics are an accident. In our universe, they could be different in other universes. But I kind of grew up in the era of physics when I became a scientist because I wanted to understand why the universe had to look the way it does. But if it doesn't, the rules have changed.
What do you mean? What does that mean exactly?
Well, I
Like if
mean,
it doesn't have
if we always assumed there was one single universe, and if somehow you tweaked the knobs a little bit and changed somehow the forces or something else, the whole thing would fall apart. It had to be, there must be some fundamental theory explaining why the universe looks the way it does. The forces, the four forces in nature. Even my cat is upset about it, as if you can hear him meowing. But the four forces, why they have, why we have the particles, we have all of these things that are otherwise a mystery. We felt, well, if we had a fundamental theory, it would explain everything. And if it's possible there are many universes and the laws of physics are different in each universe, then the laws of physics in our universe may just be an accident, may just be we may be the way they are because they allow us to be here to observe them. If they were any
what do you mean
different,
by
we wouldn't have evolved in our universe.
what do you mean by accident?
What I mean by accident is that there's a probability distribution among universes, and and different universes can have different laws, and there's nothing fundamental behind it. And by an accident, I mean that literally that if there are many universes, we may only exist in a certain fraction of them. Not we, but life like us might only exist in a certain fraction of them, and and therefore the fact that we observe the laws we do may just be a consequence of our being able to evolve in our universe. And I call that an accident. There's no fundamental reason why the laws in that case are what they are, except that we're here to observe them. In the first
What would
case,
it
if there's one universe and a single theory of everything, if you want to call it that, then everything is in some sense predetermined to be the way it is, because the laws of nature can only take one form.
what would it mean for the laws of nature to not be an accident?
Well, it would mean, what, as I say, it would mean the universe I thought we lived in when I was starting out as a physicist and for much of my career, namely one in which if we're smart enough, we will find out that there are fundamental reasons, physical reasons why there are four forces, why the laws of physics are what they are. And, we've made progress to try and understand, at least in our universe, why certain things that appear strange, why we have, say, the weak electromagnetic interactions, really the fact that they're different is an illusion. It was one of the most exciting stories in physics, trying to understand how that illusion arose. I wrote a whole book on it called The Greatest Story Ever Told So Far. And we kept that progress going. And ultimately, some people thought they might have a theory of everything, which would ultimately explain exactly why gravity and the other three forces were what they were, why we have the particles we do. And that theory was known initially as string theory, but it had the opposite effect. It suggested, after much work, and it's still not clear that it has anything to do with our universe in any case, but it suggested that the possibilities were almost endless. There could be 10 to the 500 different universes, each of which had different laws of physics. And so it was not only not a theory of everything, it was not a theory of something.
Wow. The last comment I have on this particular point is that I'm having a hard time understanding what it would mean for a law of physics or the law of nature to be random or a coincidence versus to have some fundamental cause. And the reason I say that is because if you were to identify that fundamental cause or reason, I could then ask, okay, but what's the cause of that? Or what's the reason?
There's probably always an infinite regression of whys, if you want to call it why, but how is more important. And I think one could at least argue that unless the forces were what they were and the constants of nature were what they were, a consistent physical reality could not result. From some fundamental mathematical argument that you'd have an inconsistency, that would be mathematic. You couldn't have a mathematically consistent universe. You might say, well, why do we need a mathematically consistent universe? A universe in which is stable and exists, and in which has dynamics, and things happen from day to day, and it doesn't. And so, but you can always ask that question, I think, ultimately, and whether we'll ever end the infinite regression is not clear to me. I described in one of my books, which became very popular, as a universe from nothing, how you could get our universe from absolutely nothing without any supernatural shenanigans. But people always ask, well, yeah, okay, but what, was there a before that? And that may make no sense, because time itself could have arisen at the origin of our universe. But even if it does make sense, the answer is it's not it may be an interesting question, but it's not relevant to understanding whether we need supernatural shenanigans to make our universe the way it is. It may be a grander question, and one that may not ever have a answer that we can test. But people keep wanting that regression and looking for elephants all the way down, or turtles all the way down, or whatever your preferred analogy is.
And you've spent a lot of time researching these ideas. You mentioned the books that you wrote. You've been a leader in this field for a long time. And during this time, what is the most mind-blowing theory or concept that you've been a part of or discovered?
Well, the most mind-blowing is this energy of empty space, which is still a cosmic mystery. Why should empty space weigh something? Why should it be the dominant energy in the universe? And why does it have the value it has? If it was much bigger, then galaxies would never form and we wouldn't be here. These are fundamental questions. We don't have the slightest answer. It was extremely difficult. It took a year for us to finally decide to publish our paper suggesting this craziness in 1995. We were driven to it by looking at the data at the time and suggested the only way that data would be consistent is if empty space had energy. In fact, the dominant energy of the universe, 70% of the energy of the universe residing in empty space. And we're driven to it finally because that's, didn't seem to be any other out, but it took a long time. No one really accepted it until 1998, 3 years later, 1999, when one of the consequences of that is that the expansion of the universe is speeding up, not slowing down, which is weird. And it was discovered by two sets of astronomers that the universe is speeding up, not slowing down. Such an amazing discovery that those astronomers were awarded the Nobel Prize in 2011 for discovering that.
and you were an essential part of that process. And now this idea that so much of the universe is empty is no longer a controversial idea. It's
Well,
accepted.
it's always controversial in the sense that we don't understand it. And just in the last few months, there was a paper, an observation suggested this energy in empty space might not be constant, but it might be changing. As some people, I think it's probably wrong, but there's going to be at the forefront of physics. There are always open questions, and there's always controversies.
Well, what would you say is the most controversial idea that you've put forward?
Well, I put forward many controversial ideas that could have been right, but nature didn't accept them. Well, I mean, associated with dark energy, I'd say the most amusing controversial idea I put forward, which is probably wrong but could be right, is that in fact the energy of empty space is really not fundamental, and it's going to change and go away. And normally that would make everything in our universe disappear, but we figured a way out of it and to make it happen so that nothing we saw would change. And so if that's true, I've really saved the universe in the future. But I suspect that idea is wrong, but it's amusing to me nevertheless.
Well, when you have ideas like this that are kind of controversial, how do you then respond to critics?
Well, that's the way science is based. I mean, there's always discussion. Things are never done in a vacuum. There's always debate and discussion. The first question is it mathematically sound? Does it work? And if it does, the question is, how could you test it? Or is it an idea that is more attractive than other ideas? Initially, before one has experimental evidence, unfortunately, one throws ideas around, and some of them are more attractive based on what we know, and some of them seem quote unquote natural, some of them seem unnatural. Those are awful ways to distinguish whether a theory is right or not. Because if you can have the most quote unquote elegant theory in the universe, but if it doesn't agree with the data, we throw it out like yesterday's newspaper.
So, right. So if it's just a matter of proving it or disproving it, then there's not much like emotion behind.
The only way, look, in science, the only way something becomes accepted is if experiments demonstrate it's there. Right? If it can't be tested, it's really not. It may be interesting, but that's it. And so if the experiment's validated, it doesn't show it's true, but it's not false. If the experiment's falsified, then it's false and we throw it out.
So where does that logic?
Science is empirical. It's not. I'm a theorist, but science isn't theoretical. It's empirical, and it's based on experiment, and experiment is king.
Given everything you just said, where does that leave us with regards to the multiverse?
Well, in principle, you'd say, well, it makes it, and some people have argued it's almost religious because you can't ever directly probe these other universes. However, in fact, as I showed with a friend of mine and a colleague who happened to be a Nobel laureate, Frank Wilczek, a bunch of years ago, there are ways we might be able to get solid indirect evidence that other universes exist. If we, for example, were to measure gravitational waves from the early universe, they could give a clear indirect signal that there must be other universes. And you might say, well, that's not good enough. Indirect signals aren't good enough. We lived that way a long time with atoms. Atoms were hypothetical mathematical constructs for a long time. In 1905, people didn't even believe them. Even chemists thought they were just useful mathematical constructs, many of them. Einstein showed in his PhD thesis that there were indirect ways you could probe for the existence of atoms. And within 5 years, atoms were accepted. No one ever thought we'd ever see atoms. It turned out we could. Using fancy electron microscopes and things like that, we could get more or less direct images of atoms. But no one didn't believe in atoms just because we couldn't see them directly. All the evidence pointed towards them. And maybe, if we're lucky, that'll happen with other universes. It doesn't have to happen, and it could remain forever a cosmic mystery. Depends whether nature is being kind or not.
What does multiverse even mean? Does that mean like there's another Lawrence Krauss and Jake Newfield talking?
No, not necessarily. It could. If there's a multiverse, means a universe which is more or less causally disconnected from our own. When I was growing up, universe meant everything. That's probably what it comes from in Greek, or who knows. But it was realized that operationally that's kind of doesn't mean much. Really, our universe is just all the regions that we could once have affected us, or that one day we can affect. If regions are outside of that, they're causally disconnected from us. They'll never have an impact on us, and we'll never have an impact on them. And so, if such regions exist, it's reasonable to consider them as other universes because they're causally disconnected from our own. They could be causally disconnected in space, in our four-dimensional space, as happens with inflation. There are many other universes that are literally moving away from us so fast and so far away that we'll never know about their existence. Or in the case of string theory, which generally requires the existence of other dimensions, there could be other universes living in higher dimensions that we can't probe. And those are less well motivated in my mind than the inflationary multiverse. But they're basically regions that we can't impact directly on, and vice versa. Certainly in the multiverse, in the inflationary multiverse, that's the case. In the case of string theory multiverses living in extra dimensions, gravity can propagate across the extra dimensions, and then there can be some effects of one universe on another, and they're not completely causally disconnected. But there's no evidence of such things, so it's really metaphysics right now, not physics.
Yeah, I guess we'll see if we're able to eventually find.
We'll see. That's the way it works. We keep looking. We keep opening all the tools we can, opening every new window we can in the universe, hoping to discover things. And we may be lucky, we may not. It's not up to us. The universe doesn't exist to make us happy.
So let me back up a bit. What drew you to these big questions of the universe in the first place?
Well, I think they're interesting. I think everyone's had some of these questions about their universe for when they grow up. How did we get here? Are we alone? All of these questions that people have. People then tend to give up those questions a lot, and some of us are lucky enough to be able to be paid to have a career to ask those questions. It's a privilege to be able to do that. And one that was never lost on me. But I think they're among the most fascinating questions that humans can ever ask. And so I would turn it around and say, how could you not be interested in those questions?
Well, did that curiosity drive you to become a theoretical physicist?
Sure. Yeah. And seeing what my predecessors had done, learning about from Galileo on about the wonderful discoveries that have been made, and Einstein, and then people like Feynman and others, pushed me on to want to become a scientist. Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I write books, because maybe I can encourage some young person to carry things forward.
And I've seen you mentioned these books. I've seen in some books and articles you've mentioned religion. Well, what's your overall view on religion? Is there a place for religion alongside science?
No. I mean, in the sense that religion is based on something you can't. Religious beliefs are based on belief instead of evidence, and moreover, the world's major religions all believe things that are manifestly false, and for which there's not only no evidence, but there's counter evidence. And so religions and myth and fairy tales are certainly have played an important role in human history and binding cultures, and led to. Amazing thing about human history and culture is that we've gotten as far as we have. Sitting here on this planet in the middle of nowhere, we're able to ponder questions and answer a lot of them, having to take us right back to the first moments of the Big Bang and to the far future of the universe. It is an amazing testament to human culture, and it'd be a shame to not to stop asking those questions. It would indicate that our human existence was now sterile, as far as I'm concerned.
You had a recent article, by the way, that was talking about the discovery of the Higgs particle.
Yeah.
And you said that the Higgs particle, the discovery of it, ruined Peter Higgs's life. What do you mean by that?
Well, Peter Higgs was a guy who liked his quiet, private life, and discovery thrust him into the public eye, and then the Nobel Prize did what it always does, which just means that the world, it keeps intruding on you, because then everyone has expectations and demands of Nobel laureates, and he just wanted to get on with his quiet life of scholarship. He didn't really, and he was a very pleasant, quiet, gentle man, and he didn't like the spotlight. So He made a discovery that put him in the spotlight, and he said it ruined his life when it finally was discovered. It's hard to know if he really meant it, but I think, the Nobel Prize is a very intrusive experience.
He should go move to St. Peter's Island.
What was that?
Where are you located?
I'm in Prince Edward
Oh,
Island.
Prince Edward.
He,
I'm
he,
tired.
he,
He should move to Prince Edward Island.
he was in Scotland. He was in Edinburgh. He figured it was far enough away from the world, but obviously it wasn't.
Yeah.
But it's nice to be on an island in a way. But even as you can see, even if you're on an island, you can't avoid people zooming you or talking to you.
Yeah.
Or trying online. So the world
Sure.
intrudes wherever you are now.
Yeah. And back to the conversation about different universes, because you've talked about the potential existence of these small dimensions that are undetectable. So if those hidden dimensions are real, like what does that mean for us? What implications does that have for us?
If they're real, I mean that there's
Yeah,
no evidence that they are. Let's make it clear. There's no
Yeah.
evidence that they're any
No,
extra.
if they're real, if they're
If
real.
they're real, on the whole, it would have almost no significance for us whatsoever, except at a fundamental level to perhaps help us understand the origin of our universe, and to perhaps understand once again why the laws of physics are the way they are. But those extra dimensions, you wouldn't, they would be untouchable, and that's what part of the problem of that theory is, that we can't do experiments that can probe those dimensions. If we could, we'd know if they existed. That's part of the problem of string theory.
And you mentioned string theory and you mentioned laws of physics. So quantum mechanics challenges our understanding of reality. What do you think is the most strange implication of quantum physics, and how
There's
does
nothing
that?
about quantum. There's nothing about quantum physics that isn't strange. There's no non-strange implication of quantum physics. Says that all our classical reasoning about how the world works is once again an illusion. That I throw a baseball and it follows a single trajectory is fine for big classical objects, but it's not true for electrons, which follow many different trajectories at the same time. And things can be at two places at once, and things that are far apart can be tied together in ways that make it appear as if there's faster than light communication, although there isn't. And so everything about quantum mechanics is strange. And what's amazing is that we actually have discovered it, because it's so well hidden, first, and secondly, that we can manipulate and utilize quantum mechanics to create semiconductor transistors that allow computers and phones to work, that we can manipulate it at even other levels, and we're making very strange new materials that may have wonderful technological implications. And we have superconductivity and all sorts of weird aspects of quantum mechanics. And what's remarkable is that we can utilize the strange properties of quantum mechanics to potentially develop new technologies that in principle make our world better.
Including AI? I mean, what do you see as the biggest opportunity for AI?
Opportunity? What do you mean
Yeah,
by that?
what do you think we could create with AI? Or what do you think the
Well,
possibilities
if we had
are?
a general purpose AI that had its own intelligence that was smarter than us, it could, well, first of all, as many people realize, it could do a lot that might appear to be harmful to civilization. But more importantly, it could obviously teach us things, couldn't it? I'd like to learn new physics. What physics would be of interest to a general intelligence, artificial intelligence? What physical questions would they find interesting? And maybe it could explain quantum mechanics to us in ways we can't understand. And so the opportunities of having something far smarter and more creative and ingenuitive or more ingenious than us are great, but so are the dangers, and so are the risks. And the future is always full of opportunities and risks, and it's up to us to try and prepare for both, I guess.
What do you think those risks are?
Just the end of human civilization.
Oh, just that. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, that's a
Well,
pretty good risk for
what would that?
humanity.
I mean, like physically, like how what would that look like? Like how would that actually?
I mean, that you just go to your favorite movie, go to Terminator, and go to. I mean, some people have argued that a self-programming, intelligent artificial system might find that the optimum solution for the long-term health of the world is to not have humans in it.
I see. So hopefully that doesn't
Yeah, and so a
happen.
lot of people are worried about it and talk about it, and And I've just been writing about nuclear war of late, and I mean, that's the clearest example. If you had AI systems controlling the response to nuclear weapons, or and warnings of imminent launch, and this has happened almost many times in history now, where there've been false alarms. The question is, could an AI start a nuclear war? I don't think it's any more likely than humans starting a nuclear war, but it is worrisome when decisions can be made on the scale of microseconds about our future.
Wow. And shifting gears a bit, you wrote about free speech on college campuses. What's your overall belief or
My view is that free speech and academic freedom are an essential part of the progress of science and education and scholarship in general. And my view also is that those things are disappearing on colleges campuses in the West, in the US and in Canada. People are afraid to to ask questions. Anytime you're afraid to ask questions, then learning ends.
Well, to what extent, if there is speech which is universally accepted as just purely racist or hate speech and is not contributing to any actual intellectual dialogue, it's not meant to be put as a curious. Should that, if someone's preventing that, how are they limiting academic?
I'm sorry, there's no universe. It's all in the eye of the beholder. And point is,
well, but I think 99.9%, but 99.9% of people would agree that an explicitly racist comment is racist. So that's not the eye of the beholder.
I know, but is it okay? So you accept it's racist, but some people might say it's racist but true.
But if we say racism,
and who are you to say it isn't, unless we at least examine the question and find out if it is or isn't?
But we have laws
forbidden to ask the question: are men better at math than women? It shouldn't be forbidden to ask that question. The answer may be no, but asking the question, even questions that appear to be offensive, and so there are statements that are racist. Yes, but should one be allowed to ask them, or should one never be allowed to ask a question of whether, of any sort, are there fundamental differences? And you can determine whether they're normative or not, and the point is there are fundamental differences between people, individuals, between genders, between sexes, and between races at some level in terms of susceptibility to certain illnesses and other things. But to pretend that any such discussion should never occur is my mind inappropriate. I think we have to, as Christopher Hitchens, and not just as Hume and others, Kant, and probably I don't know who else, John Stuart Mill probably said, the speech you have to protect is not the speech you agree with; it's the speech you find abhorrent, because maybe that speech will force you to rethink some of the things you think are true about the universe, or about nature, about humans. And what you're doing, if you give up the freedom of speech, you're giving up your freedom to learn that you're wrong, which is really the heart of scholarship, and in my mind, the heart of human progress.
Without necessarily contradicting anything that you said, we do have laws. Right. We do have laws in this country that protect people against racism, right?
They protect people against inciting violence.
Not just that, no, but universities like Title VI, there are regulations that say you can't discriminate, and that there's laws against discrimination. And I think when you dig into discrimination and say, what does it mean? There's a clear-cut line. I'm not saying that we need to ban all conversation. I'm just saying, I think
there are laws that, but one can argue what is discrimination. All of these questions should be arguable.
Yeah.
And the point is that there are laws about speech, and those laws are very carefully chosen precisely because of this concern about the slippery slope about hate speech. Well, hate speech is always who determines that speech is hateful? Do I give you that authority to determine that something I said is hateful and therefore should be banned? No. Would you give me that authority over anything you say? Absolutely not. And so
So let's say, like, for the sake of argument, let's say I agree with you, but
it says you can't.
yeah.
By the way, the laws don't say you can't talk. The law says laws talk about actions, not speech. The law says you can't discriminate against racially or sexually. You can't hire specifically. And by the way, that's the laws of the U.S., not in Canada. You're allowed to do that in Canada, but where I live now, but under certain conditions. Sorry, but they're based on actions. They're not based. It shouldn't be allowed. It shouldn't be illegal to say, you know what? I think we shouldn't. We should be, able to hire on the basis of race or sex. Saying that should not be illegal. It may be stupid. It may be wrong. It may be arguable, but it shouldn't be illegal to say it. It's just, because there may be arguments. Who knows? There may be a good argument someone can come up with. So I don't think there are any laws. The laws of the nation are very carefully worded when it comes to speech, and I don't think universities are the place to suddenly supplant those legal definitions with universities' determinations of what's politically correct or what might offend or what might make a place seem unsafe. Education is by design intellectually unsafe. If you're not pushing your boundaries, you're not learning. And this notion of safe spaces and possibly offense, that somehow language can produce violence, is so ridiculous, especially today when we hear the very same people who argue that misgendering someone is violence, but then argue on behalf of violence, say in the Middle East, real violence on either side, is just so ridiculously hypocritical, or at least inconsistent, as to be laughed off the stage.
So when it comes to this free speech issue on college campuses or other issues in science, what do you see as the most pressing challenge or opportunity for our society?
The challenge is that right now there's a bureaucracy instituted in universities that challenges free speech, that restricts the free speech, that in fact does lead to discrimination against individuals and harms and causes both students and faculty to be afraid of speaking out. So the biggest challenge is to get rid of that entrenched bureaucracy. And that's going to be hard because it was built with good intentions, called diversity, equity, and inclusion. It was built with good intentions, like, hey, we should have an equal environment. We should have a diverse environment and all the rest. And so good intentions, badly applied over time, have produced this entrenched system that ultimately says you can't get a job unless you basically do a loyalty oath that you agree with the political goals of whatever administration is there. And also, if somehow you disagree, well, you can be fired for disagreeing with the goals, with those goals. And the minute that happened, look, I wrote my first article. I wrote, maybe not my first, but one of my first articles a bunch of years ago on this subject for the Wall Street Journal. I got about the ideological corruption of science, I think it was called. I got lots of letters from faculty around the country who wrote to me under assumed names, saying, we agree with you, but we are afraid they came from private accounts with assumed names because they're so concerned that their colleagues or their bosses might find out that they agree that, that ideology should not replace empirical progress. And when that happens, that's like Soviet Russia was, or Hungary, or some, it's not what you would imagine in the one place in the world where you think there should be open debate, and that's a university.
Wow. Final question.
Wow, it's pretty scary. And in fact, I'm finishing editing. Well, I'm not finishing. I'm editing a book now called The War on Science, based on some lectures I gave. But there are 40 major scholars from all political persuasions and many different fields of inquiry, all pointing out the war on free speech and open inquiry that's happening in universities, and it'll probably hopefully come out sometime in late this year. And it's
I'll look out for it.
Yeah, hopefully it should cause some discussion.
So you're working on that project, and my final question is, what other projects are you looking forward to?
Well, I always like to say that 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 um, that I never know what I'm going to be doing in a few years, because or even in a few months. But I am looking forward to that project. I'm looking forward. Well, I'm looking forward to my Origins podcast. And my Origins Project Foundation. We're about to launch bookings for a trip we're doing to Bhutan, which is a country that determines the gross happiness product instead of the gross national product, with Robert Sapolsky, neuroscientist, and Peter Singer, a philosopher, and I. And that's going to be a wonderful trip next year. And I'm looking forward to the discussions my project will have, and some open events we're going to have, public events we're going to have. And I'm looking forward to what I might write, both in beyond that book, and as I say, it's great to not know what you're going to do next in the long run, because it means there's a universe of possibilities.
Wow, that's a lot of exciting things are on the horizon. So, Lawrence Krauss, thank you so much for the time, for connecting today.
Well, I appreciate